Welcome back to Sage Connections. Today, I'm joined once again by Dr. Suzanna Paris, and we're diving into a topic that is everywhere right now, magnesium. You've probably heard about it for sleep, stress, muscle recovery, and even hormones. But today, we're going to break down what magnesium actually does in the body, who needs it, and how to use it effectively. Enjoy. So magnesium is really kind of having a moment right now. Andrew Huberman was just on Modern Wisdom, and when he was asked what the next big supplement trend is going to be, his answer was immediately magnesium. He said vitamin D is old news and all this other stuff is old news. Magnesium's the thing. So I'm curious, do you agree with that? And why do you think he would say that? Why do you think magnesium is getting so much attention right now?
It's funny, I didn't listen to that podcast, but when you were asking that question, I was just about to say, I think magnesium is the new vitamin D, right? It's having a moment because in the holistic community, but also in the conventional medical community, we're realizing that on one hand, we need it for so many different reactions in the body, which you and I are going to talk lots about, but it's not just for relaxation. But I think the other thing that's similar to what happened with vitamin D is we're realizing how many people are really magnesium deficient. I remember when we realized the deficiencies in vitamin D, it was something like 50% of the global population was deficient in vitamin D, or at the very least had suboptimal levels. And we're kind of seeing the same thing that the average person globally, but definitely in the United States, is not even meeting their RDA. So I think that's the main reason is because we're looking for supplements that have kind of a bigger bang for your buck, where it's not just a supplement for one particular thing, but something that has so many different purposes in the body.
Wow. So at a high level, what does magnesium actually do in the body and why is it so important?
So we need magnesium for at least 300 or 350 different reactions in the body, which I'm not going to go through all of them, obviously, for the sake of brevity, but on a very global scale, we need it for energy production. So it actually helps to make energy or ATP within the cell itself. The polar opposite of that is that it also helps with relaxation. So it helps with sleep, it helps with relaxing the nervous system, reducing hyperexcitability. It's great for headaches. It can help with bowel motility. Bone health is a really big role that it plays too, along with vitamin D and calcium. And then it also plays a role with blood sugar. So things like insulin signaling. And then it has a role in cardiovascular disease too.
You mentioned that so many people right now are deficient, just like vitamin D and magnesium today. So even if they feel like they're eating well, why do you think people are deficient right now?
Great question. Patients ask me that all the time because they do actually genuinely feel like they're getting enough nutrients from food because a lot of my patients are really, really diligent. But I use this analogy of a car, right? It's like on one hand, is there enough of this mineral coming into the body? And is that matching what their output is, right? So you're putting gas in the tank of your car, but if you're driving your car excess miles, you're only going to get so much gas. And so one of the problems that we run into is both the input and the output are really imbalanced. On one hand, even for those patients that are eating really well, they're eating whole foods, they're eating organic, our soil quality globally is so depleted of minerals that it's incredibly hard to get enough from it. The flip side of that is that so many of the things that we do in our culture now deplete magnesium. So the big ones are stress, that's going to dump magnesium, things like alcohol, caffeine, hormones, birth control, those dump magnesium, and then even some subtle things like being exposed to blue light, being exposed to ionizing radiation, so flying in a plane, being exposed to loud noises, and certain drug classes too. So things like diuretics will dump magnesium, antibiotics can deplete magnesium. Definitely too, if people have a GI issue, right, they might be putting magnesium in. It might be matching input and output, but if there's malabsorption, if there's Crohn's, celiac disease, inflammatory bowel issues, bacterial overgrowth, we're just getting into this net deficiency over time.
Wow, I didn't realize that blue light was one of the things that depleted it, and I feel like we're all exposed to it constantly.
It
constantly.
raises our cortisol too, which
Mm,
also increases the demand for magnesium. But yeah, there's some interesting data on it dumping magnesium over time. Which is, I
interesting.
think, why people are on their devices. They just end up feeling so kind of agitated and jittery. I mean, I can see it in myself even by the end of the week. I'm not as calm as I was on Monday morning.
Yeah, yeah. And so, what are some common signs and symptoms that somebody might be low in magnesium? I know you mentioned fatigue, but also difficulty sleeping.
That kind of tired but wired patient is classic magnesium deficiency because on one hand they're fatigued because they're not making enough ATP, but they're also kind of on edge and they're kind of irritable. They might not be sleeping well, and other symptoms that might creep up are things like the restless legs, difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, anything that's more muscular and contractive in nature. So think things like headaches, right? Things like muscle cramping, muscle twitching, heart palpitations can be a really, really big sign, especially post exercise if they're sweating a lot and they're losing more magnesium. And definitely, I feel like just that general feeling of like just malaise, just really not feeling well overall, but there's not a significant thing that's wrong, could very well be magnesium related.
Okay. And then, what about the nervous system? So, you mentioned the musculoskeletal system. What does
Yeah,
it do?
for the nervous system, it's calming. So, on one hand, while it can, this is kind of paradoxical, right? People don't quite understand this. On one hand, it creates energy inside the cell, but it also relaxes the nervous system. And it does that by increasing something called GABA. GABA is like our inhibitory neurotransmitter. So, basically, it's like the metaphorical parking brake on like the runaway car. So, when our body feels overactive or agitated, or our mind is in that monkey brain place where it's like, trying to sort out a thousand things, especially when we're trying to sleep. Magnesium can really help to calm that through the action of GABA.
Okay. So, as a sort of maybe a little selfish question,
Yeah.
because this is what I do, but can magnesium play a role in pelvic floor dysfunction? I mean, you mentioned muscle tension. The pelvic floor is still muscles and ligaments and all the same things. It just happens to be in a different area. Um, have you noticed people with magnesium deficiency having pelvic floor dysfunction?
Yes. So, on one hand, I would say after vitamin D, I see magnesium being suboptimal in nearly every single patient. So, that's kind of very global and across the board. But I do think that it can help with pelvic floor dysfunction through kind of two mechanisms. On one hand, definitely there's a huge stress component to pelvic floor dysfunction. So, I feel like by just helping to manage stress, increasing their stress capacity, their resiliency, and helping them with sleep, that in and of itself can likely have a beneficial impact on their pelvic floor, but purely more from that contraction standpoint, right? The low magnesium is going to increase cramping, it's going to increase that muscle tension. So we're getting more spasming, we're getting more tightness. We're also getting, again, more of that nervous system hyperexcitability. And so it becomes a little bit of this vicious loop, I find, when it comes to magnesium, where the stress component depletes the magnesium, and then the depleted magnesium makes them more sensitive to stress. And the whole thing just kind of snowballs.
Yeah. There are so many different types of magnesium when we're talking about supplementation. There's glycinate, citrate, malate. Can you break down some of the main types and when and why one would be chosen over another?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great question, Luba. It's one I get often. And I think people think that just because they're taking magnesium, because they've come across it, or if it was recommended to them, that everything must be okay. But depending on the form of the magnesium, and that will dictate where it goes. And it also will dictate how well it's absorbed. So on one hand, we have magnesium oxide, which is probably the least absorbed. And it's not meant to be absorbed into the body because it actually acts more as a laxative. So that oxide and magnesium combined will relax the bowels and facilitate a bowel movement. Sometimes, surprisingly, at times where you don't want that to happen. So it's definitely more of a laxative. Citrate is not dissimilar to the magnesium oxide in that it can help with moving the bowels, but it does have a better bioavailability. So we're getting more of that magnesium into the tissues. The Opposite of that is something like magnesium glycinate, where the magnesium is bound to glycine, which is the major amino acid in the body. And because glycine gets taken up so readily, most of that magnesium is absorbed. This is really, really good for people that don't tolerate magnesium because they've got a sensitive bowel. These are the patients that might take 200 milligrams and really have more of a bowel evacuation the next day. This is great for those people, but it won't really have an impact on moving the bowels the way that some other forms do. I find glycinate is great for anything global. So things like anxiety, things like sleep. In general, it's wonderful for relaxation. My favorite is magnesium malate. That's typically my go-to. That's where the magnesium is bound to malic acid. So it really does get deeper into the mitochondria where it can help with pain. So great for fibromyalgia, great for restless leg, great for muscle cramping, but it also helps with all the other things that magnesium typically helps with, which is energy production, sleep, relaxation, great for headaches, and can be, again, really helpful for moving the bowels if patients are a little bit more constipated. And then the two other forms that are getting a lot of attention lately are the magnesium threonate and the magnesium taurate. The magnesium taurate is, again, bound to taurine, and that goes into the heart. So much better for cardiac conditions. And then the threonate is great for cognitive function. So good for calming the brain, but also great for thinking, planning, decision making.
Do you ever have patients that take different types of magnesium? Like, let's say they take you said the oxidative,
The
uh,
oxide.
the oxide, excuse me, the
Yeah.
oxide in the morning to help move their bowels, and then maybe malate in the evening.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have patients combine different ones. I typically will say anything that's more of a bowel motility agent. So the oxide, the citrate potentially, and even the malate to take those at night. That way it'll facilitate a bowel movement in the morning. And then something that's typically lower dose, like a magnesium glycinate, can be taken during the day.
Are there any forms that people should avoid or be cautious with?
I would say the oxide most likely, mainly for that one reason where it can cause a bowel movement, it can cause a bowel evacuation. And if patients are really, really sensitive, that can also lead to a lot of fluid loss. So we're looking at possible dehydration, we're looking at possible decrease in their blood pressure. And I also always caution magnesium with anybody with late stage kidney disease because they just don't do a great job of eliminating the magnesium from the body. So that can have some mild side effects for those people.
Can you realistically get enough magnesium from food alone, or is supplementation usually necessary?
I feel like that's the $1 million utopian question. I want to say yes, but I'm going to say no because I really don't think that we can. I have a lot of patients who are diligent. They're eating really well. They're very, very on point with their nutrition. And when we run their blood work, their magnesium is coming up typically suboptimal. So, 1.7 to 2.5 nanograms per deciliter is where we want to see magnesium on blood work. And most people are coming up in that lower end of the range. So the RDA for magnesium is anywhere between 3 and 400, depending on if you're a man or a woman and how active you are. And most people aren't getting it. And so that's not even accounting for all the things that deplete the magnesium on the back end. Going back to that car analogy, the stress, the lack of sleep, the caffeine, pharmaceutical use. Short answer is no, I don't think so.
So you're not going to tell me to eat all the chocolate.
Eat
Right.
all the chocolate
Eat
because
all the
it's super
chocolate.
high in
Okay.
magnesium. And that's also a reason I think why women crave chocolate before their
Yeah.
periods, right? Because there's that massive hormonal shift. A lot of women experience more anxiety, more nervous system hyperexcitability. And so that's a great example of that magnesium getting dumped and you putting it back into the system.
Yeah. So you mentioned athletes. So are there specific population that benefit most from magnesium, like athletes, like pregnant, postpartum, women, people under high stress? I mean, it sounds like this is kind of a universal problem at this point, just because we are exposed to so many depletion sort of things in the environment. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so two-sided answer to that. One is I do think that everybody could benefit. I always say if I grabbed 100 people off the street, I could bet that they're going to be vitamin D deficient, magnesium deficient, and probably omega-3 deficient. And usually that is the case. So even without testing, I'm typically very comfortable supplementing. But definitely we want to look at, is there an increased demand? Is there an increased loss? And is their input low? So great example is people who are on a really restricted diet. Absolutely, they're going to need more magnesium. Anybody that has an increased demand, so an athlete is a great example of that, right? They're pushing their body, their demand's going to be higher. They're also losing a lot more magnesium through sweat. So people that are sweating a lot, whether that's through activity like an athlete or possibly even somebody who's using, a hot tub or a sauna on a really regular basis, they're going to start depleting their minerals. They're also going to need a lot more magnesium. And pregnancy and lactation, absolutely. In pregnancy, oftentimes there is a higher demand because there's a higher metabolic demand. There's higher stress on the body. And women during that time also are noticing some changes in their appetite, right? Either they might have nausea, they might have vomiting, their food intake is going down potentially, or they're just able to get down something like ice cream and pickles, depending on the day, that is not coming into their system. There's also some interesting, though controversial data on magnesium supplementation preventing preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure in pregnancy. Most of the data is done more on intramuscular and IV, but I think that even oral could be really helpful because I've seen that in my patients where they've had preeclampsia with previous pregnancies and now they're on it leading into their pregnancy, and it can be really helpful for that. Restless legs too, cramping in pregnancy, it can make a big difference. And then obviously that constipation that can come from both the hormonal changes, but also from the space occupation of the growing fetus and it compressing on the bowels.
Yeah. So is magnesium something that people should take daily long term, or is it better to cycle it?
I have patients take it long term. My answer,
We're good. We're good. Okay.
I have patients take it long term. I really have not seen anybody take too much magnesium. The reason I do that is because typically I test in the beginning and most people are coming back low. Once we get them up to optimal levels, I don't want to take them off because I know that they're just going to go back into a deficiency state anyway. So my take is to take it long term because of all the things that do deplete it.
So what do you think is the biggest misconception about magnesium that people have right now?
I think it's probably twofold. I think it's that it is a one size fits all approach and the sense that, I'm taking magnesium, so it must be working for me. Um, the other thing is that we can get enough of it from our diet, which I truly do not think we can. And the other thing I kind of want to point out, because sometimes I find that magnesium is a game changer. I posted something on Facebook last week about stress, and I did make a little post about magnesium. And I had one patient lovingly chime in and be like, it's been a game changer for me. For some people, it's not. And it doesn't mean that it's not working, but I do feel like sometimes magnesium is a very subtle supplement that kind of works in the background a little bit and does all of these wonderful things, but it's not like you've gone from 0 to 100 overnight. These are the patients that will say, well, I don't really know if it's working for me, but then they'll discontinue it and realize, well, they're not sleeping as well, or their stress tolerance is lower, or their muscle cramping is back, or their headaches have returned. And so that's kind of the other thing I would say is it might not be a magic pill in as far as how your symptoms improve, but most people will get some benefit from it.
Wonderful. And obviously, our bodies are so incredibly complex, and this is just one of the things that we need to be paying attention to. But I think, as you've described so beautifully, this is a very big component that everybody should kind of pay attention to. It should be kind of one of the basic things that are tested, yearly or however often.
Agree. And most people are not being tested for magnesium, even on their basic blood work. Definitely, basic blood work is not going to show optimal levels for most people. It might even come into the medical normal, but we also have to remember that what we're able to see in the blood is only a fraction of what's going on in the tissues. And blood magnesium really only shows us about 1% of our total magnesium store. So the other 99% is either in tissues or in the red blood cells. A really interesting stat that I saw is that something like 60% of ICU patients have low magnesium levels. And so that kind of becomes a bit of a chicken or egg conundrum, right? Of like, are they deficient because they're in the ICU? Or is their deficiency possibly contributing to other types of comorbidities?
So if not by blood work, is there a way to test magnesium in the tissues?
Yeah, so red blood cell magnesium, which is still done through blood work, but it's not your standard serum magnesium, tells us the most information when it comes to magnesium within the cell.
I see. Okay. Fascinating. Thank you so much. Do you have any last words about magnesium?
Yeah, I would say as far as dosing goes, because I know there's going to be probably at least one person that listens to this and is going to think that they can't take magnesium because their bowels are already loose. They don't want to make it worse. Maybe they've tried something like a magnesium glycinate in the past and that still aggravated them, though it's supposed to be pretty gentle. The other ways of getting magnesium into the body are going to be through the skin. So there's magnesium creams out there, there's magnesium gels and oils out there. Epsom salt baths are a really good thing as well because you can absorb that through the skin in a bath, or you can even put your feet into the dry Epsom salts and get that magnesium through the soles of the feet.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. Again, you are the most frequent guest that I've had on the podcast. So thank you.
I'm so honored for that, believe that.
And everyone, she will be back. You are definitely a favorite guest of the podcast. So thank you for being here, and we will do it again soon.
My pleasure. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much to Dr. Suzanna Paris for coming back on and sharing her knowledge with us. I hope this episode gave you a clear understanding of how powerful something as simple as magnesium can be when it comes to your overall health. If you found this conversation helpful, make sure to subscribe, share it with someone who could benefit from it, and leave a review. It really helps us grow this community. And as always, take care of your health and your wellness.